Welcome to Unit 1, Video 7. This will be the final video of Unit 1. In this video, we are going to talk about the Nubians, Phoenicians, and Hebrews. This will be a very brief introduction to all three of these groups. We're going to begin with the Nubians. The Nubians are located in Africa along the Nile River. They're actually going to be located just to the south of ancient Egypt, which, if you remember, because the Nile River flows north, from south to north, this lower part of the Nile is going to be considered Upper Nile, and then the part that is further north is going to be considered the Lower Nile. So Nubia is actually located on the Upper Nile. Nubians are going to connect Egypt with the rest of Africa, the rest of civilizations located in Africa. Nubians are going to be polytheistic. They are often going to follow the same gods as those followed in Egypt. Again, polytheistic means belief in many different gods. They are going to also build pyramids to their emperors, in the memory of their emperors, just like we saw in ancient Egypt. So we will see a lot of similarities between the two. In terms of government, the kingdoms are going to be ruled by pharaohs, very much like the kingdoms will be ruled by pharaohs in Egypt. But eventually, certain kingdoms are going to be conquered and ruled by Egypt. In terms of the economy, in other words, how they make money, they're going to trade goods all along the Nile River, specifically with Egypt. Pottery is going to be a good that they trade quite heavily. Eventually, they will become known as the Kush after 1100 BC, and they are going to unite under one single king by 751 BC. So before that, there were several different civilizations, but by that time, they united into one, under one single king. After the defeat of the Egyptians, the Kush actually, or the Nubians, saw it as their responsibility to keep the Egyptian culture alive. So a lot of what we know about Egypt today is thanks to what the Nubians did to make sure that all of that was saved. We're going to shift here into the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians are located all along the Mediterranean Sea, originally starting in present-day Lebanon, but they will spread to surround the Mediterranean Sea. They will stay almost exclusively on the coast of the Mediterranean, which means right off the water. They are polytheistic, meaning belief in many different gods. They were very religious, to the point where they would sacrifice children to please the gods. In terms of their government, they were never a united country because they were all along the Mediterranean Sea, and the Mediterranean Sea is so widespread. They would have city-states, and there would be different leaders in each different city-state. And they would also have slightly different culture, but for the most part, they practiced the same religion and they had very similar culture, but they would be ruled depending on who the ruler was in each city-state. They relied mostly on sea trade. They were very, very important in sea trade, hence why they were located on the Mediterranean Sea. They had the ability to travel throughout the Mediterranean Sea and trade with other areas surrounding it. Goods that were traded by them included wine, weapons, slaves, metals, ivory, and purple dye. Purple dye was very difficult to come by. It took, I believe, a large number of snails in order to create even the smallest amount of purple dye. And I believe the story is that they would leave them out to dry, and then something about crushing them leads to the creation of purple dye. But anyway, it was pretty difficult to come by. It was very difficult to make. And so because it was so difficult to make, it became something that only the rich could afford. And even today, purple is considered the color of royalty. And this goes all the way back to the time of the Phoenicians, when purple dye was so difficult to make that only the rich could afford it. So those who were considered royals. So even today, we have that same influence of the purple dye. Just as we've talked about with the other civilizations, slavery at this point in history is not based on race. The Phoenicians created the first written alphabet. Even our own alphabet today is loosely based off of this original alphabet. And this is the idea where symbols make a sound. If you've ever heard of the phonetic alphabet, which is sounding things out, that comes from the Phoenicians, phonetic Phoenicians. You see the similarities in the names. The Phoenicians were also known throughout the ancient world for their glass-making skills. Now we're going to talk about the Hebrews, a brief introduction. Hebrews are located in the Middle Eastern region in what is present-day Israel, and they are going to practice Judaism. Judaism is a religion that is the first major monotheistic religion. Monotheistic means belief in one single God. Judaism is going to be founded by Abraham, and it remains today to be one of the world's major religions. The Hebrews were ruled by kings, and the kings were in charge of things like implementing taxes. High taxes are going to lead to division. People are going to be unhappy with this. Division leads to weakness, and so the kingdom is actually going to be taken over by Babylon, and Hebrews are going to become slaves. The written law code for the Hebrews is going to be the 10 Commandments, believed to be God's law, and society was governed. The Hebrew society was governed by the 10 Commandments. It is considered one of the earliest written law codes. That is the end of the Unit 1 class video notes.